Welcome back to the Authenticity Calling podcast. I am your host, Ralitza Spassova. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we have a very special guest on the podcast. I know I always say that, but all of our guests are super special. Today we have actually the co-author of Beyond Coincidence, another co-author. It's a book that I signed up to do, and I met this lovely human being, Alfina Lofaro. And I'm so excited to have her here today. She's also a transformational coach, a professional kinesiologist, among many other things, such as a teacher, mentor. She does leadership training. She's been a motivational speaker. So many different hats that you can choose from. Alfina, thank you so much for being with us today on the Authenticity Calling podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I've been super excited to get to speak to you as well.
Yeah, it is very exciting. So I'm really curious, how did you get to doing what you're doing now from maybe when you started thinking about your career as young adults? Like, what am I going to do when I grow up to actually getting to where you are now? What has that journey been like for you?
An interesting one. So I can remember being in primary school saying, I want to be a primary school teacher. In high school, I wanted to be a high school teacher. And then when I got to university, I did my undergraduate, then my honors degree. I was going to become an academic. I was set. But I took a look in the mirror and I was only 22 and about to embark on a PhD and went, what do I know about life? I know nothing. What am I, who or what am I going to talk about with any authority? So at that stage, I was like, right, well, what am I going to do? And I went, I'm going to go live overseas. So I did. And I went and lived in Italy for a while, where I was an English teacher. I taught adults English and I was a nanny during the day as well.
Wow.
And when I came back to Australia, I had a choice again in my life, education. And I'd always wanted to be a social worker, counselor, go down that path, but I knew I was too sensitive a soul to do that. So I chose education again. And then 7 years into my teaching career, I got really sick. I got chronic fatigue after two bouts of, I think over in the States you call it mono.
Okay.
I guess here we glandular fever, it's what it's called. And I got it twice in 1 year. It's in my first year of teaching. I picked it up twice and I just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And it wasn't until a mentor asked me, like, what happened? Why have you been this sick for this long? And it was 7 years. She said, what happened 7 years ago? And I go, well, I started teaching. She goes, well, maybe you need to look at that. And I was like, okay. And then I realized I was in the right place, but not on the right path. So education is always what I wanted to do, but I wanted to use it to empower people rather than teach them skills that would allow them to just get another job and do everyday stuff. I wanted it to be bigger than that. So about 13 years ago now, I became a coach and haven't really looked back from that in terms of what I do. Like I know that coaching, kinesiology, and the stuff that I do now is the place that I want to be in educating people rather than in a school framework. I still do some work in schools from time to time because I love working with kids. But I also love the idea of giving people the opportunity to learn about themselves and grow and learn how to have a great life,
Wow.
have great relationships is kind of my biggest focus because um I could get really quite judged for this one. I don't think we're deliberately taught how to relate with each other and how to be in relationship with ourselves or other people really well. And so that's what I'm really passionate about, educating people around these days.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Wow, what a beautiful journey. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as you were sharing, I have like so many thoughts popping into my mind. I'm like 22 and you were wise enough to know that now is too soon to go into philosophy of like, what do I know? I need to travel. I need to go do this. And so that inner trusting of that voice that comes up, I think a lot of us are truly not quite connected with that voice. So when it speaks, we might ignore it, which is really interesting that you ended up taking a path kind of, down into teaching, and you had to physically, like your body had to physically show you that this isn't it. So yeah, that's like the misalignment that I speak about often with people, is that, being in that state of uncomfort, of dis-ease in your body creates disease. Like other people have said this. This is definitely not my term. But it is just a nice reminder, because coming from the medical world, this is no secret. We treat symptoms, we get rid of the symptoms, but we don't actually look at the root cause, at least in Western medicine. And so I really love that somehow inadvertently every single person that I've interviewed on this podcast has mentioned their path to disease being a misalignment. And this has not been intentionally done at all. This is just like, authenticity. The Authenticity Calling is the podcast. This is unscripted, unedited. We're not having pre-interview conversations for anyone to say this. And it's the exact same story with conscious people that recognize when they are out of alignment, their body gets so uncomfortable with their state. That out of alignment is that physically people get sick. And so I'm really curious about the person who brought you to that awareness and to that knowing, and that knew to look back 7 years. How did that happen? And like, what was the training behind that person's wisdom, and how did they know to look back 7 years? And just, if you can kind of just take us through that, because I'm really curious to speak on that for the audience. And then also, how did that information land for you in that moment, and that light bulb when it clicked and you were like, oh, take us through that if you don't mind, because I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, really good question. So my the mentor at the time, I was doing a personal growth workshop, and she was actually the firewalk instructor, and she took us over firewalk and taught us our mind is an incredibly powerful thing, and that you can literally walk on fire. And so I thought, this woman can facilitate this. She must know some things. And she was also someone who had a specific, I guess, wellness or health coaching kind of background. And I mean, right, well, you're the person I need to ask, like, how do I stop being sick? And she was the one who introduced me to the whole world of, the metaphysics of our body, and how it, all that stuff. These days, we've got some really good literature out there, like the body keeps the score. And there's a whole heap of stuff, all of you've got all
Science
that,
is caught up.
all that stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
And she knew to ask that question based on her wellness coaching background, years of research and study into helping people use their mind in a different way, basically. And how did it land? It landed like anything in my life that has been it landed like this. So it was like, so the world that I know is not what I know. So what is the world then? Like, what? I mean, walking through this world thinking life is like this, and it's not. And it took a few days for me to people, no, but that, what do I do? Like, who am I now? Like, what do I've always wanted to teach. I'm a teacher. But I'm sick, and something's making me sick. And I actually resigned a full-time permanent government job, not much, about 6 months later, and went, right, I've got to do something else. I was introduced to the world of coaching, and when I don't know how to run a business, I don't know how to do any of this, but I'm going to do that because that's what I'm hearing my body say. Stop doing that. Do something that fills you with more joy. So yeah, it landed an interesting way. Let me put it that way. A couple of times in my life that's happened.
Yeah.
A couple of times in my life that's happened. I've gone, so what you're saying is everything I've thought till this point is not right, or not the only way to think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It really does land that way. Once that moment of awareness happens, it's like you can't unhear that. You can't keep doing the same thing. And I'm hearing that it took you another 6 months after that to actually say, okay, like the ton of bricks has lifted now that has hit me with this information, and I'm still here, and you figure the only option is I have to stop doing this.
Yeah. So part of the recognition and realization of all that personal growth work too, it was a 7-day program, highly intensive. You're there all day for 7 days till from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. So I say they pull you apart and put you back together again, kind of thing. And part of it was that understanding of that our words create our world. And what I was saying about myself to myself, what I was speaking into the world, was really would make most people sick, I think. Like that negativity, that vibration of all of those words, the negativity that I was speaking into myself
Yeah.
was making me sick. And what I didn't realize is that I now have in hindsight is the world that I was in at that time, that teaching, the bell goes every 70 minutes. You've got to be somewhere, you've got to constantly be present. Everyone's wanting your time. I was working in one of the largest schools in the Southern Hemisphere, 3,000 kids, 300 teachers. And you can imagine the noise, the pace. And at the time when I didn't know, I was somebody who nothing I ever did was good enough. I'm sure you've heard that little gem.
Lived it.
And that was
Yeah.
a belief I carried that was like a magnet, that I kept attracting all of that same experiences. And so I was teaching in an extraordinary school. So I would teach history and geography and Italian. So the kids I worked with, they're Australian kids, but they learned 4 out of their 6 subjects in Italian, and I was one of those teachers. So I took trips to Italy. I was teaching the honors kids. Like I was doing these programs where we implemented recycling as well. It was extraordinary experience. But everything I did was because nothing I ever did was good enough. I had to one up it, and I had to keep going. I had this like addiction to success that was literally killing me. And what I was saying to myself is, that's not enough, keep going. That's not enough, keep going.
Yeah.
And so I had to stop. I had to break the pattern. And at that time, what I didn't realize is the pattern was not school. It was me. But I
Yeah.
had to stop doing that thing to stop the pain,
Yeah.
was what the conclusion that I came to.
Yeah.
Because what I know now though is an environment like that where you've got like, I mean, you would know, being a doctor, like that, those environments, like it's constant. I'm sure it's tapping your cortisol levels daily. Like, come on,
Oh
let's go.
yeah.
That's what we're going to do now. What are we going to say now? We're going to do this. We're going to mark that. We're going to do this. We're going to show that kid's alive and that kid's alive. And it's just pings all of those
Yes. Yes.
fight, flight. Yeah.
It's insane how much of a mirror you are to my experience. I also I went from medicine to teaching actually, and I don't think you know this, but I taught medical school at the same time I taught high school life science, 7th to 12th grade. At the same time I taught GED night class for the locals to graduate high school. And so
Wow.
yes, I know very much what that like go, 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 constant running back and forth. Yes, 100,000%. And it's so like I got full body chills as you were saying that, and I was smiling. You're talking about your distress, and I'm here smiling for those of you watching on YouTube. And that's the reason, is like we are such mirrors for this life. And I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which is an achiever slash wing 2, which is a helper. So I'm sure we're very similar in that regard as well. So I know very intimately what that constant sense of not being good enough feels like. And that's actually what I've included in my chapter of Beyond Coincidence, is that constant self-rejection, that constant judgment. There's always these layers of judgment that create the shell of inauthenticity that we carry around all the time. Because how can you be authentic if nothing's ever good enough?
Yes. And that's the other time when the whole world fell on its axis for me. When I mean, so I created all of this, so I'm attracting all of this. What? what do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit because it's funny. I had a recent just today actually. I was driving to my corporate job. I had a conversation with one of my best friends, and he said, you know, it's so interesting when I started looking into quantum physics and how, you know, atoms move around constantly. They don't sit still until we focus on them, and that's when they get fixed when we measure them. And we started talking about that, about how that he says you talk a lot about manifestation, but then you don't really talk about the science behind it. And he's like, I think that would be really valuable. And so we talked a little bit about the quantum physics, which actually, when we talk about manifestation, a lot of people think, oh, manifestation, it's this airy fairy thing. And we know it's scientifically proven. And so, what, because I think a lot of people, when they hear that you created this reality, they go into the victim mode and they go into blaming themselves and they go into, rather than, you know, doing the opposite, which will get us out of it, non-judgment and like that radical self-acceptance and all of that. How did you go from being in a cycle of self-rejection, basically is like the not good enoughness, right? Is how did you go from that habit or that pattern to actual radical self-acceptance into authenticity? Because I think that journey, not enough people talk about it, and I think that is probably the hardest part of the journey. So yeah, I'm just curious if we can share some wisdom
This is
on that.
this is and I love it. I feel like saying now that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
So, and how we came to know each other through the book. So I then became a coach in the organization where that first realization happened. And over a decade, I worked as a mentor and a speaker and a coach. And interestingly enough, unfortunately, there was a face, Alfina, who would be out in public, but behind the scenes, there was other stuff going on for me and within the organization that were so not aligned.
Okay.
And, you know, my nothing I ever do is good enough. It's also was cripplingly attached to I don't feel like I have any value in the world. So I need to do things of value in order to feel valuable.
That's right.
And that then drove this whole ignoring friends and family's good advice, tuning out my intuition, being completely out of alignment with what I knew was good for me. And so 2.5, nearly 3 years ago now, I made the choice to leave. But I was cooked, like I was back to burnt out. I had gone from, so when I first had these realizations, I lost heap of weight. I lost over 40 kilos. And then in those last 2.5 years of COVID and all of the stress and all of that misalignment, I literally bent myself out of shape. I put on over nearly 50 kilos in a couple of years. And so when I left that organization, I was pretty broken. I'll call it that. I don't like using that word because, you know, I was pretty in a mess. Like I had alienated my friends, literally 4 of my closest friends, to my 2 best friends didn't want to talk to me anymore. They're like, we don't support you. We don't want to be around this. And so I was alone, overweight, unhappy, and left a job that I was giving me a sense of being purposeful and on value in the world. Fortunately, I'd already met some really great people. My mentor, my trainer, my kinesiologist trainer, and a few other people, and I was able to build a professional career that is even more fulfilling than that. But personally, I had to actually look at this is where my world fell apart because I'd always prided myself on being a very, very, very good friend, always. And all of a sudden, some of the best people I knew didn't want anything to do with me. And I didn't want anything to do with me. And that started a pattern again of like, you're rubbish, look at you, all of this type of stuff. And so one of my kinesiology mentors, one of the trainers, in a session one day, I was like, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. And I'm doing the weight loss stuff, but it's not working. Like I'm eating, I'm swimming, I'm gymming, I'm doing all the right things.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, Alfina, and consider this. Everything I've heard about what you're doing is coming from a place of you don't want to be overweight, you don't want to be you don't want to be unhappy. That's just you're just going to keep getting that. I'm like, no, no. You focus on what you want. So even with kinesiology, the whole philosophy that we work on is we design a goal that's the priority for the body, what the body is actually requires. And then we ask the body, what do you need to be in alignment with this goal? So that every cell in your body is in alignment with what you actually want. So the body will reveal to us what gets in the way of that, what unconscious sabotage programs, what nutrition the body needs, what supplementation, what
Wow.
exercise. We can get so specific with the muscle testing that the body will tell us exactly what it needs, this being needs to vibrate at the frequency of what it wants to attract, right? And I was like, she's like, so you are going to keep attracting the lack, the shame. You keep talking about what you don't want, guess what's going to happen?
Yes.
And I go, no. She said, so until you come to a place of acceptance of where you already are, I go, I can't accept that. Who in their right mind is going to accept being this overweight? No one. And she goes, yep. And that's why it's not going to change. I'm like, and I was so angry. Really, I was like, I can't, how would you tell a person who's this overweight to accept that they're this overweight, that they've got no friends? Well, it's not that I didn't have friends. I have some amazing friends. And like, people don't love me anymore. And it's just like, no, I'm not accepting that. She goes, great. So we're going to keep having this conversation probably in a year. And I said, no. And she said, well, why would you want to stay this angry? And I go, because that's what motivates me. I get out of bed and I go exercise, and because I don't like who I am driven, man. Like I am there at 4 a.m. every day and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And she goes, yep. And that's great. But until you figure out and accept who you are right now, that you are where you are and that where you are is absolutely perfect, I go, I can't accept that. Yeah. You're telling me to accept what I am? How will I change then? How will I be motivated? And she goes, well, just keep thinking about it because you keep focusing on this. And then that really like put me on the path of understanding, like I truly understood that there is no way you can manifest or attract anything other than you already are. The vibration and the frequency you're putting out into the world, the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing, show the universe what you want. And what I was invisible, ugly, unhappy, and based on what I had experienced in the organization, and let's go with cult-like aspects of that organization. If that, I want to be very honoring, but there were some cult-like aspects of the previous organization I worked with. I realized that I had allowed myself to be manipulated. I'd allowed myself to bend myself out of shape, to accept financially less for myself than I knew I could be. And I'm sitting there going, I can't accept that. This is rubbish. Like no. Yes. But until I did go, right, well, there's some joy here. Let's find it. Let's look for it. And then that transformed everything, because what I could really come to understand that if I want to create a life that I want, I have to be deliberate about it. So that same kinesiology instructor, she said to me, Alfina, we're like a big magnet. We attract what we are. So she said, charge the magnet the right way. And I was like, yeah. And I know how to do that. I know how to listen to my body and give it what it needs to be at to charge it positively, rather than keep getting stuff stuck to me. That's yucky stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Brilliant. Yeah. Someone else shared that with me about the magnet and the positive and the negative. And it's on one of the podcasts. I'm just like, my mind is blanking on who, and I'm terrible with names. So it's not going to be a name, but even the face is not coming to me right now. But it's so brilliant what you shared. And so what was that moment? What had to happen for you to actually change that, for you to actually go into that radical self-acceptance, that moment that maybe it was a light bulb, maybe it was, what did that look like for you? And
Mm.
maybe as people are listening, because I'm sure people are listening to this and they're like, that's me right now. Like, I just know there are so many people, the people pleasers, the good girls, the nice guys, like all the people out there that have a pattern of self-rejection, whether it's to achieve more, whether it's to make more money, whether it's to make their bosses happy, whether it's to make their parents happy or their spouses or their children or whatever that looks like. I think I named like every mother in the world, because how many
Yeah.
times do we sacrifice our own needs for our children? Um, but it's that moment when it hits you, you're like, oh my goodness, the more that I self-neglect, the worse off everybody in my world is. So and I also wanted to ask you, actually, maybe I'll ask you later if you don't mind just listing some of those things. And I think you shared some of the examples of, the words like that, the words you would say to yourself that were those self rejections. Because I think a lot of people, we don't recognize how many things we say about ourselves that are actually not in that acceptance, that are not positive. And we bully ourselves into motivation, like you shared. I love that reflection, because I think it's very common in our world to push ourselves, to hyper overdrive ourselves into that, like, that's that toxic masculinity that we talk about, that toxic masculine energy of being in the go, 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 the do, the structure and on time. And, you have to just keep going, instead of recognizing, wait a second, this is not a natural pace of life. Let me fall back a little bit into the feminine and feel a little bit and use my intuition a little bit and get a little creative and like say no to everyone else and just trust my inner wisdom and guidance. Like, what was that pivotal moment where you just, and maybe it wasn't a pivotal moment where everything shifted, maybe it was gradual, but what was the apex or the pinnacle that you said, okay, something's got to change? And what was that first change that you made that pushed you in that right direction?
So that 20-minute argument with my instructor in a session about not wanting to accept where I was, I guess, the thing that broke it all open. Because I was wandering around in the world, the coaching hat on, going, yep, I'm focused on the future. I'm taking action towards it. I believe it's possible. I've got this covered. I'm nailing this. Until she said the things about what your focus is still on what you don't want to be. I said, no, it's not. I'm going there. I'm doing the things because, yeah, but because you don't want to be this. And
Mm.
okay. And the things that I would say was, you're ugly, you're stupid. Oh gosh, no, yeah.
We
Why
know
bother
better.
today?
Yeah.
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 Why bother today? Who's going to listen to you? Just, and so the things that had started happening was, just don't want anything. You'll be happier when you have just what you've got. You've got a roof over your head, you've got a lovely husband, got a lovely home. Don't want anything else, because then you can be happy because you made it.
So I want to pause us here, because this is a really important moment. The difference between acceptance and complacency. I think that's really important, because acceptance does not mean accepting where you are. And acceptance also does not mean that what is happening in your world is acceptable. It doesn't give permission. It doesn't say that any of this is okay. So I want to really clearly define, and my mentor coach, Alyssa Nobriga, the one who created and teaches the Institute for Coaching Mastery, she describes it as a master's degree for coaching. And it really truly is, because she has done, like, she's a couples counselor. She's done a master's in spiritual psychology as well on top of that. And then recognize that in therapy, we stay focused on exactly that. We stay focused on the problem. And what I like to tell people is the universe doesn't hear no or don't. I don't want to be fat. No, the universe will hear the fat and it'll give you more of that. And so when we're speaking the words, like it is so important to manifest exactly what we want. Fit toned body, really health and vitality, like the ability to run for 10 kilometers. It's all in the positive. That is how we manifest, but also magnetize and attract anything that we want. And it's so I speak about this a little bit in my chapter, which is the release, right? It's like we have this vision, and so many times we want to hold on to it so tightly that it doesn't have the ability to flow to us. And so it's that surrendered, aligned action that we're taking and being able to receive. So those are two totally different conversations that we can have in the future. But I'm curious what you have to say in terms of your awareness of what does acceptance actually mean in terms of moving forward in the right way.
Yeah, really good question. And I love that distinction there too, because that type of acceptance did not make me happy. I was like, yeah, but this isn't it.
Yeah.
This isn't it. Okay, I'm really grateful for what I've got, but this isn't it. And I could hear it's like, but that's not who you're supposed to be. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. And there's those, the 5 regrets of the dying, not being who you want to be, not saying what you wanted to say, all those things. And I'm like, right, well, I'm halfway through life, I'm guessing, at 46. So better, 40, I was 45 at the time. Better sort this out. And so I guess what I came to understand is that I call it, in my chapter, I call it the suffering gap. The most of the suffering that I see on the planet for my clients and even for myself is created in this gap between what is happening right now and then what I think I should be, where I should have gotten to, what should have happened. And you should all over yourself, but there's this small gap there that, like, we all think, like, if I focus on what I want and I'm going to attract that, if I take action towards it. But what I'm not doing is going, who I am right now is beautiful, perfect, whole, complete, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm rejecting who I am right now in order to get that.
Yeah.
But that vibration of judgment, I say you can smell it from a mile away. And that's a lot of judging myself not being okay. And I actually, so what real acceptance looked like was actually looking at myself and going, so what if you could accept exactly who you are, what size you are, what would that look like? Who would you need to be?
Yeah.
What would you need to be doing? What would you need to, like, how would that sit? Well, like, how would, like, test it out, try it on,
Yeah.
how's that going to be? And that was probably the start of the real work. I say the real work of looking inwards and going, okay, so I was a really bad friend for a while.
Oh.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
And can I own that? Can I accept that? Do I like it? No, I still don't like it to this day, 100%. But I know that it's got me where I am. I know that my intentions were never nasty.
Mm-hmm.
They were driven by a program that I couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that the need to feel valuable on the planet and the need to feel like what I was doing was good enough would drive me so relentlessly that I couldn't see that I was hurting other people.
That's right.
Because I was so convinced too that I was doing good.
Yeah.
I'm doing good. Like, I'm helping people. Like, these people are getting these breakthroughs and they're all these building businesses and they're great leaders and just helping people in relationships as well and doing a lot of relationship coaching. And I'm like, these people are having like, I'm doing great work. I'm a good person. And so I had to own, I guess, own that I can be rubbish. I'm a human being and I can be rubbish.
Yeah.
And this statement sounds a bit weird, and that's okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
As long as I take the learning from being rubbish
Yes.
and empower myself and the people around me with it.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That is radical self-acceptance. I love
Yeah.
that description of it, because that level of vulnerability and humility, when people talk about humility, humbling ourselves, I think it's exactly that essence of, oh, all of my achievements do not equal my worth. I am unconditionally worthy of love, acceptance, all of those things. Even if I achieve nothing for the rest of my life, even if I've achieved nothing, I'm still 100% worthy of love, of acceptance, of whatever it is, that thing we're trying to prove. And I recognize that I have been doing some things out of integrity. And I recognize that that is also a choice. And I think that's where life changes as well, is being able to slow down and be that radically vulnerable to say, oh, I'm a little bit of a hypocrite right now. Like, I'm helping everyone else, but what about me? Right? What about my relationships? And I love that ability to catch ourselves, because that's what we're asking our clients to do every single day as coaches, is we're holding up that mirror and we're saying, catch yourself, right? And we always come back to, if you're going to be a clear mirror for your client, we have to do our own work. And that's often where I start with clients by saying, interview a few other coaches. If you're not 100% sold, if your body is not a full body yes, I actually want you to go out there and interview other coaches, but make sure you ask them, are they doing their own work on a regular basis? Do they have a coach? Are they doing ongoing training and development, so that they don't project their issues onto you, because that's going to cause more problems? And it sounds like that little piece of that, like, out of integrity with the coaching model that you ended up staying with for so long. And I always look at the silver lining, is I'm sure you gained so much for being part of that experience. And I'm sure you learned, and it taught you, and it guided you. I'm sure there was like business skills and a lot of different tools, sure. And yet still you were in that sort of pattern of self neglect, because you were willing to stay unaligned to be somewhere where you were achieving, right? And
That's
so,
exactly right.
yeah, that level,
I see.
that level of like vulnerability and self-acceptance, that is the radical self-acceptance that actually helps us to shift. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that can be some of the hardest work that we do, because
Yeah.
who wants to be wrong? No one. Who wants to think that they've hurt people? No one. And yet I did, and I own it, and I wow. That's all I can say. Like, that was, I don't know, it's kind of the thing that set me the most free, because walking around pretending like you're perfect but never feeling anywhere near that, and judging yourself all day every day, is exhausting.
Exhausting. Oh my goodness. Talk about self-rejection. Yeah, that's maintaining the resistance, right? It's like,
Yeah, and I heard there's a self-compassion, she calls herself a self-compassion expert, Kirsten Neff, I think her name is.
mhm,
And she talked about how every time we do that rejection, that's a stress response to the body. Like, we're just putting more of those stress hormones into our body. And I went, oh, I'm dosing myself up daily,
oh,
minute, every hour, every other minute, maybe.
yeah,
Like, wow. So I am putting all of the yuck into my energy, but even my hormone system.
that's right.
That is not going to help me lose weight. That's definitely not going to help me get to where I want to get.
That's right.
um yeah, so it was literally a stop running and start listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's so, so beautiful. And so do you feel that, because I work with a lot of women, I work with men as well, to embrace more of that balance of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And so was it ever, like, did it ever come to you in that language, in that sort of
Yes.
exploration? Yeah. And what was it that supported you? Because I support women in recognizing that you're stuck in the masculine overdrive. And they're like, okay, I get that, right? It's like, in order to become a leader, we have to be masculine. It's like, no, that is not your superpower as a woman in this lifetime. Let's talk about being feminine. And so, yeah, I guess a word of wisdom to our listeners that might be stuck in this and that are just recognizing um, the overdrive and sort of that commitment to motivating ourselves by bullying ourselves or shooting all over ourselves or whatever that looks like. What would be your sort of words of wisdom or your mentorship um, from this space to a place of radical self-acceptance and aligned, surrendered action? I know that's a big ask, but I just trust the
Yeah,
wisdom.
this is good. I'll just share with you that overlaid on all of this is, and I talk about this in the chapter, is that I was born second in a family, a Catholic Italian migrant family in Australia. And I have three sisters. I was born second, and I carry my grandfather's name. And in traditional Italian culture, the boy would get the grandfather's name. And my parents wanted a boy. And for most of my life, I felt like that they wanted a son, and I worked like a man, literally on their farm, drove tractors, lifted things. I was my dad's shadow. Um, you ask my sisters, I was the one that would take care of the cars, mow the grass, all of the boy stuff. And so for me, that the masculine came naturally, and that's how I was raised like that. I had the name like that. And so I didn't see it. I was just like, that's just what you do. And it made me very successful in terms of very capable. People always describe me as very capable, and I get stuff done, and very it allowed me to be very strategic and logical and those kind of things. So it was great. It gives you a lot of success.
Sure.
But if you looked at my body and my well-being, it was so not what my body needed to be well. And every time I push in that direction, my body lets me know.
Yeah.
Like literally, it keeps the score. If you want to use the title of that book again,
Yeah.
it keeps the score. Like every time I push too far, I would get sick. I put on weight. And even if I swim, gym, eat next to perfectly, if you want to call it that, always eat nutritiously, like I was putting on more and more weight.
Yeah.
So I am driving my body relentlessly to do something it's biologically proven it's not supposed to be doing. And even physically carrying the weight and the responsibility. And I noticed this too about being a coach. It's a very masculine energy being out with people, and the energy's going out. And so I talked with one of my teacher friends about this recently. One of the things that we talked about is that noticing when the energy's going out a lot and you're not receiving, you're in masculine big time. And so I'm teaching, I'm doing, I'm coaching, I'm giving, I'm doing all this. That's very masculine. Like, where am I receiving? What am I giving to myself? So some of the things that I do now to be in that place is like, I will allow myself to be entertained by other people. I'll allow myself to be taught by other people. I'll listen. I mean, I love reading and I love listening to podcasts and talks because I like to be given. I like to get that energy back.
Yes.
And letting, biggest one was letting my husband drive. I love it's like, right, I can sit here and receive this, or allowing myself to be cooked for or taken care of, or just those types of things. But I know if you're looking at when you're in that, like you're pushing so hard, your health is suffering. If the energy is always going outwards, you're giving, 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 you're out in the world giving, but you're not receiving, you're so masculine.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm going to take it one step further just because we
Yep.
live in this world where women are always right and like, we don't need a man because we can do it all by ourselves. And it's like, okay, yes, you can, and you don't have to. And your husband's probably, or your partner, or your male counterpart, or your colleague that's a man, or whatever that looks like, they might not do it your way, but give them a chance to do it their way and just receive because we are so like the part of that, I think being in that masculine overdrive, I feel like creates a little bit of that micromanaging and a little bit of that inflexibility to accept others as they are and want things done our way because our way is so good, no one else could do it better. Isn't that a little bit of a pattern that we have as women in our generation? And I want to invite the women who are listening that you might be catching yourself and you might be laughing right now, or you might be crying. I don't know. That would have been me 5 years ago. I would have been hearing this and I would have been probably laughing and then later on at night crying because vulnerability was not my strong suit. That moment of recognition of like, oh, I am creating this for myself. And no wonder my relationships with the people in my life are challenging at best because I want things done my way. And I'm not receiving like ever. Even giving love is a very masculine energy because it's giving, like you said. So yeah, I love what you shared. And what did you have to do to to be able to just let it go and let it happen in a way that was maybe not your way, but it was a way of receiving? Like, what is the tip that you would tell someone listening and catching
This is
themselves?
interesting. So there is a you might really love this lady too, the woman from America called Alison Armstrong, and she talks about the differences between men and women. But she's done it for 25 years. She studied them for 25 years, men for 25 years to figure it all out. And she actually said something that I've never forgotten in one of the presentations I was at of hers, which was that as a woman, if you're going to work in a masculine energy, you also need to rest in a masculine energy. And a masculine energy, when they're at rest, does nothing. They have a do nothing. That's so sleep re-strengthens testosterone. Like they have to literally be doing nothing to recharge testosterone, but they literally have a capacity to do nothing. And I was like, well, okay, so if I'm out there in all this masculine, do I maybe need to recharge in a masculine way too to rebalance it out? Okay, let's give that a go. My doing nothing was listening to something while marking some stuff, or like got a book while I'm listening to that thing. I'm like, that's not doing nothing. I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Why am I like this? And so I think I've gotten good at understanding, like, okay, if I want to balance out those masculines and those feminines and let go of things, then there's going to be, if I'm massively in the masculine, there's going to be times where I'm going to have to do nothing, literally, and be okay with that and move through the pain of wanting to do 5 things at once. And then if I want to relax in the feminine too, is to allow myself to be taken care of, which may be inviting someone to do that for me. So sometimes that's paying people, that's paying a psychologist to listen to you, or paying a masseuse to give you a massage. But it's I know in my household, it's also saying to my husband, would you heat up my heat pack for me today, please? And thank you. And he's like, I'd love to do that for you. And comes to the point now where he even asks, is there something I can do for you today?
Yeah.
Because I'm willing to receive it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, he wouldn't even ask, because I was like, no, I'll
Yeah.
do that for myself,
That's
thanks.
right. That's right. Oh,
Yeah.
we could have a whole other podcast on that topic. And I feel
Yes.
like you and I, we could talk forever. So
Yes.
this has been such a lovely connection. I'm so, so grateful for you. So happy to be co-authoring this book together. Now we have a
Yes.
creation that like we're connected for life. This is so
Yes.
exciting. I cannot wait to read everyone's chapters. And yeah, it's really exciting, this work, because it really calls something else from you, doesn't it? Is this your first time authoring a book?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Amazing. I've been hearing
Well,
calling to write an entire book, and I just haven't, like, again, the doing 5 things at the same time is not conductive to writing a book because it's much more challenging than I thought. So I thought, let me start with some guidance with writing a chapter. Yeah, it sounds like similarly that was your path, hey?
yes. Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. It was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. So my whole chapter is about living deliberately. And I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write something. And then you go to write it. It's like, well, oh, okay, yeah. And now people are going to read this, right? So I've got to work through the being seen thing. And what am I going to say? What am I saying? Okay, I better get clear on what I'm saying. So yeah, it's been a big adventure, and it has, along the way, the best part about it has been it has fulfilled the goals that I had around relationships, was meeting fantastic people like yourself. So, and connecting with people all around the world, and that I've gotten to do that from the comfort of my own home,
Oh, I love
but through this amazing vehicle. Yeah.
it has been so amazing. And Crystal is just brilliant because this is not just it's not just co-authoring. This is so much of that radical self-acceptance, those personal reflections, what we have to get through, all the triggers that come up when we start to do this work. And even I think part of the writing was like our origin story. That was brilliant because I'm like, oh, so many things came up when I started diving into the origin story. So yeah, writing is so much more about learning, I think, about ourselves than anything. And so yeah, I feel so honored to be co-authoring this book with you and just to share this space together and learn more about each other and share this with the listeners. So I am so grateful for your time, for your energy, for your chapter. And we're going to turn this podcast off, but we're actually going to do a fireside chat, which is going to be available on, I believe it's going to be on hillhouse.com. We'll link it in the show notes. I'm not sure what exactly the website is, but off the top of my head. But we'll link it in the show notes. And yeah, any last thoughts or words that you want to share with the audience, Alfina?
Is that, I guess, that exactly what's happened here today is like two people with like-minded who's so excited to talk to each other, that connection, that energy. I'm going to take this joy into my day and into my week. And it was so simple. It's such a simple thing. And as human beings, that's what we desire and deserve, is great connections. And so if anything, this episode hopefully inspires others to just connect with the right people.
I love that. Love that so, so much. Thank you so much, Alfina.
You're
I will
welcome.
end this podcast and we'll move on to the next item on the list.